Okay, it's about time to start, so make sure it's all on. All right, welcome to this industry Q&A panel, which if you missed yesterday's VA Q&A panel, or you're planning on missing the upcoming other Q&A panel, there's just a lot of Q&A panels, but I'm in this one, so I'm sure that's why you're all here. My name's Abby Lehrke, and I work as a freelance translator of manga and periodically anime media of other sorts. And I'll be acting as the moderator on this panel. And so if you raise your hand and I point to you, you can put your hand down and I'll call on whoever is next. Be prepared to be called on by color because I lost my glasses and I'm nearsighted. So, here's our other panel guest.
Hi, I'm Caitlynn. I'm a voice actor, so I'm bringing a whole different side of the industry from the performance-based aspect of it. So you have two completely different sides here, which I think is really awesome, so you can get more of a complete picture. And I guess it's just the two of us, so I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah. I was hoping there'd be like at least one more, but
I know.
We are gonna rock this panel together.
We are. I feel bad that I'm like sitting at a table, but it's kind of nice because we're splitting it down the middle. I've been also sitting in here because I had a panel like 30 minutes ago.
You've just been sitting here the whole time?
Yeah.
Aww.
Well, I go straight until like 7 tonight, so I was like, well, they brought me food, so I'm like, I'm just gonna sit in here and eat while I nap.
Nice.
Nayaruko just stares at everybody, which, by the way, this is Nayaruko. She's your new goddess of chaos. Worship her. She's just the idol right now, so.
Actually, I'm guilty of that too. Yesterday when I had my panel, I was sitting in here for like 45 minutes before the panel working on my PowerPoint presentation, so I wasn't done, and I was like, oh, I guess it's time to start the panel. Sorry guys, I'll just be putting a logo in here while you're waiting. So, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about like what you've worked on and stuff like that, so that we can have like a basis for.
Okay. The most popular work I believe I have done is either on Girls in Panzer as Hana Isuzu or Shiro in No Game No Life. Recently I can be found in Beyond the Boundary as Sakura Igami and Tina Sprout in Black Bullet. I am Chiyuki Kurahara in Bodacious Space Pirates, Mei Tachibana in Say I Love You, so on and so forth. I've done a bunch of roles. I think primarily the quiet monotone girls like Matsurika from Maria Holland. And let's see, the one loud character I did is Kureha Sakamachi from Mayochiki.
Awesome. I mostly work on stuff that goes digital. So, as I said, I'm a translator, I'm sorry. I work on digital stuff, so I've worked on a lot of Harlequin comic books. That's a thing. Harlequin romance novels get translated to Japanese and then they make them into comic books. And then I have to translate the comic book back into English, which means that I have to read a lot of Harlequin books. And it's not fun, but that's work.
I bet it is.
Anyhow, I also have worked in the past for a lot of different companies that you might recognize, like Kodansha, Viz. I recently got a contract to work for Viz on a more long-term basis, so yay me. But and I've worked on apps like MangaBox and the Katakawa online reading app and all this stuff. So if you're someone who reads a wide variety of comics online that aren't illegal, then you might have read something I've worked on. Yeah, and I started about 3 years ago, and I've been working with that as my full-time job for about 2 years. Yeah. So this is a Q&A format panel, so if you have a question, just raise your hand and let me know, and I will either call on you or put you down on the list of people who are next to be called on. So I think we can open it up right now. Sounds good to me. Anybody have a question? Oh my God, why did you even come to this panel?
We cannot provide A if you do not have Q's.
Yes. Oh, okay. Guy in bandana.
Abby,
Yes.
what was the easiest thing you translated and then the hardest?
Oh gosh. Like when you're looking at it from outside, and before I got a job, I was like, oh, well, if I want to practice, I can translate 4-panel comics because they're shorter and there's like, they're encapsulated in 4 panels and stuff. But those are actually the hardest ones to translate because they're like, they're like American style comic strips because they almost always have a joke at the end. And the joke usually is either like understated or kind of really goofy or a pun, and I have to make it understandable to everybody involved. So actually I find like slice of life type stories to be really easy, and also like shonen action stuff is really easy because there's always like a little bit of really cliche dialogue and then a bunch of fight scenes where I just have to put sound effects in. So it's just like, yay! I had this comic called Destroyed Century Joxer that was a lot like that, although it came with challenges of its own because some of the characters had like German names that I couldn't figure out and I had to ask the authors. But yeah, that's kind of where I stand. You'd be surprised. It's like, you'd think that the stuff with the smallest amount of text would be the easiest, but sometimes that stuff can be like almost impossible. Okay. You
mentioned doing some of the jokes and translations of that. How do you translate over a joke that does not work when it translates over to English from Japanese?
Sometimes I just write an entirely new joke because I'm like, it'll be like, oh, this pun is impossible. I did a presentation yesterday, which was on Friday, so I mean, people came and it was really great, and I don't know if any of them are now in this panel, so I'm not going to be like, whatever, I was disappointed. I did a presentation, and I presented on this joke I had to make where I was working on this comic, which, by the way, is the #1 worst comic I've ever worked on for being difficult and painful and really annoying and actually bad. It was called My Grandpa's Stories Can't Be This Weird, and it was about a kid who has trouble sleeping every night, and his grandpa comes in and tells him a fairy tale or like some kind of story, and each of them was like a fractured fairy tale, like from the Rocky and Bullwinkle thing that none of you have seen because you're all like 10 years old.
I've seen it.
Good, thank you.
Collections of them.
Oh yeah, and they're on Hulu now. Nice. Okay, but yes, the stories would be like fairy tales, but with of jokes about modern things like AKB48, which I from the beginning didn't know anything about, and I was just like,
That was in that anime.
it's like, God, oh. Because I mean, I watched the anime now, but when I hadn't watched it and when I didn't know anything about idols, I had this one friend who was like a big fan of idols, and I was like, please help me, I don't understand what these like voting ticket things are, and this is like, oh God, it was just, there's like a million puns in there because apparently the author is a big fan or something, and there was just all these jokes about AKB, and I was just like, help me. But then there was this one comic where the joke was, it was Kintaro, and Kintaro is like this legendary boy who's giant and has adventures and carries an axe or a tomahawk or whatever. In Japanese, that's masakari. And then the joke in the comic, like the entire comic, and then the next chapter, both revolved around this joke that instead of him wielding an axe or a tomahawk over his shoulder all the time, he had a guy named Masakazu on his shoulder. And Masakazu is a name, and masakari is the word for axe or tomahawk, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm gonna die, because you can't really connect those two. So what I ended up doing is changing the name of the guy. I changed his name to Tom A. Hawk, and so it was like, okay, that's a joke, that makes sense. Yeah, but then they always had like a final punchline joke that was like just more absurd than the rest of the jokes. And in that one, the joke was that when his grandpa stopped telling his story and the kid looked up, his grandpa had a guy sitting on his shoulder, and that guy was a famous guy named Masakazu, who did a reference to a commercial he was in Japan, like on the guy's shoulder, and I was sitting there like, no. Because not only do these people not know who this guy is, or the reference that they're making, which is probably a 15-year-old commercial for a gas company, there was a picture of him. And so I was like, I have to figure out a guy named Tom who might be kind of famous or famous, who has said a line related to fire or gas or something like that, and who looks, and who I can stick in there as this Tom character. And then I was like, I just Googled famous people named Tom and looked at the images for a while, and I was like, Tom Hanks went through a phase where he had hair like this guy, because it was long, sort of like shoulder length-ish, and he was kind of like older, and not like, out of shape or anything, but maybe a little doughy looking, and I'm like, Tom Hanks went through a phase where he looked exactly like that. So I was like, yes, but what about the line? And for a while there I was thinking, I'll just write something dumb, and I'll ignore the fact that he's got his finger up and there's a little flame above it, referencing the commercial. But then I remembered that Castaway exists, and I was like, I've never seen Castaway, but I know there's some sort of line about fire in it, and so I went to the IMDb quotes page for Castaway, and I found the quote where he says, look, I've done it, I've made fire, and I put that quote verbatim in there, and I just made a reference to something completely different. So sometimes I have to do that because the image is there, and the joke is there, and there's a pun that's related to like something awful or something goofy or some sound effect that doesn't really translate into English. There was a joke about a tanuki, because there's a story about tanuki and he tricks someone and there's fire, and the story is called Kachikochi Mountain, and Kachikochi is the sound for fire crackling. And then at the very end, the joke is a different sound effect that means sort of big and hard, and the mountain is the tanuki's dick. And I was just like, oh God.
Japan?
Yeah, well that particular comic actually got censored on the Android version of the app, and so did the Isenboshi one, because there's a scene where Isenboshi jumps or hides in a woman's panties and then stands up at some point, and then her boyfriend is like, oh no, she has a dick? What? This wasn't like it. That wasn't there before or whatever. Anyway, so in that one I ended up just going, I was like, well, how can I make a crackling noise, follow through and make sense in this last pun? And then I was just like, whatever, and I ignored the fire crackling noise, and I just called it Clickety Clack Mountain, because the actual story doesn't really, because instead of being a story about like a tanuki tricking something into carrying or fire, there was something, anyway, I don't remember because it's been a long time. It was a story about like someone was trying to assassinate the tanuki, and then there was a dick joke at the end, so I was just like, alright, I just won't even reference the fact that it was about this lady whose husband got killed, or this guy whose wife got killed by the tanuki, and then he gives the tanuki a bunch of sticks and then sets them on fire, and then the tanuki burns alive, and it's hilarious. But anyway, yes, I'm sorry, I've talked for way too long. Does anybody else have another question? Not just for me. Caitlin's here too, and she desires questions.
I just like looking pretty. I don't know what we're talking about.
Your hair looks really nice though.
Thank you.
Did you have that like professionally done? Or?
Yes, because I would be too scared to do either bleaching myself or dyeing my hair black by myself.
So you bleached the front and then dyed the back?
I was originally a bleach blonde, so I was kind of just like, you know what, just do the back half. So they just refreshed the front and then went and did the back.
It looks really cool, except for when I first sat up here, I was like, oh, she's wearing a hoodie and she's got the hood up.
That is my favorite part about it. So many people, I'll walk into places like, why do you have your hood on? I'm like, I don't have my hood on. What are you guys talking about? And then yesterday I was running around with my hood on just to mess with people. So they're like, oh, Caitlynn, your hair. You have your hood on. I'm like,
she's like, and for me, like, without the glasses.
Yeah, you have the...
Okay, I'm sorry. Your head's been up for a while. Go ahead.
I was wondering, both of you, what are your personal favorite anime or manga?
Anime-wise, oh gosh, picking a favorite's really hard. I'll just say my season favorite right now is Monster Musume. I loved it. I loved it. It was wonderful. I don't care. It was super cheesy. Sue is my waifu forever.
Yes, Sue is best.
Sue is best girl. You, sir, you have excellent taste. My husband's a Centauria person. He has a body
no. Really?
Yes, we have a
Is
body.
it like double long or something?
No, it's not the double long one. There's like a Mia one that's like 7.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one.
Those are awesome.
And you can like wrap it around yourself.
Yes, so favorite manga though, without doubt, is a manga called Pet Shop of Horrors.
I just bought that like
I
yesterday.
love it.
It's so good. I spent
series.
like I was supposed to go to bed and instead I spent like a couple of hours sitting in my bed and rereading it. Like
It's so good. The entire series is so good. And they have a spin-off one called Pet Shop in Tokyo.
Yeah, he moves to Tokyo. I've read a little bit of it. I read a little bit of it when I was in Japan, but I haven't read the whole thing. And also,
I don't know if they ever finished it.
no, I don't think they did because Tokyo Pop went out of business.
Yeah.
And it kind of pissed me off though because this is an occupational hazard of the translator. Is if you work as a comics translator and you read a comic that either has a bad translation or is poorly typeset and stuff, I get really ticked off. And Tokyo Pop had a policy of hiring people who were like students in college or graphic design students in college who may or may not have known how to use InDesign very well. So there's a lot of weird line leading issues and a lot of like poorly touched out sound effects, and they'll touch the sound effects out like halfway so I can see what it says, but and then they don't put anything on top of it or something. Like I don't know who they had on the editorial staff there, but they were probably asleep. Except for Hope Larson, who's now one of my editors at Viz, and so she's lovely and wonderful.
They probably went with the cheapest option.
Yeah, they did, and they would pay like $1 a page for the typesetting and stuff. I mean, if you can do it real fast, you can make a decent amount of money. However, most of the time, it is really tedious and takes forever. It's something I also have to do as a translator. But yes, I love Pet Shop of Horrors too. It's so good.
Yes, it is. It's one of my favorites. That is one I like. I own everyone. I also am getting the. They did a new Vampire Hunter D manga, and they're like massive books.
Oh yeah,
and
I've seen those.
So good. I love them. It's a really kind of sketchy, very similar to the guy who used Amano.
Yeah, Amano did the illustrations for the books.
Yeah, for the books. So it has a sketchier Amano style throughout
nice.
it, and I really like it.
Yeah, there was a Metal Gear Solid comic that had sort of the style of the illustrators for the Metal Gear Solid, like, the designers and stuff, and it looked really cool. It was kind of hard to parse, but it looked really cool. Yes, is that...
Yeah, so Pet Shop of Horrors, Vampire Hunter D.
Read Pet Shop of Horrors if you can find it.
Yes, it's so good.
As far as I go, I tend to like really obscure stuff nobody else likes. Once I met a Viz editor, right after I came back from Japan, and I was talking about all my favorite Viz comics, and she was like, "You are literally the only person buying that comic. Like the last volume that came out 2 months ago has sold like 13 copies." And I'm like, "Oh my god!" And I felt bad because I've been in Japan, so I was super behind. And so I ended up going, and we went to a comic shop that day, and I bought a bunch of it. That particular comic was called Firefighter Daigo of Fire Company M. And it's just really obscure. It's a comic about a firefighter who may or may not have moderate psychic powers that allow him to find people when they're in fires and stuff. Like there's a scene where they're doing like one of those. They'll have a building and then they'll start it on fire to like as a test burn to see how things burn and also to have firefighters be in there. And he stops in the middle of the fire and he's like, "Someone's up there." And they're like, what the hell, dude? No, this is not there's nothing in this building. We cleared it out and then we started it on fire. And then it turns out that, and he climbs up into the attic and it turns out that there's a cat who has her kittens up in the attic.
Oh.
And he just magically sensed it. And of course they never explain it. They're not like, yes, you have psychic powers. Everything else is just totally like normal, but he just has this sixth sense for saving people. And then, so I love that comic. And then that's what I like about business. They'll publish a comic all the way to the end, even if nobody is buying it. I did buy it all the way to the end. So I have those legit props and stuff. Also, I'm rereading this comic called Please Save My Earth, which has been one of my favorites for like ever since I saw the OAV when I was in high school. And this was like, 10, 15 years ago. No, definitely 15, 16 years ago. And it was it affected me a lot to the point where like I was rewatching the OAV briefly to take some image captures for my blog. And I got to the end part that always made me cry when I was in high school, and I started crying. Like I wasn't even watching it, and I was just like, oh my god! Oh. But as far as comics, I'm sorry, what?
Said I know those feels.
Yes. But as far as comics anybody else might have heard of, I really like My Love Story, Ore Monogatari, which had an anime this season that I watched. It's really cute. And I'm collecting Otomen, and I like stuff by Naoki Urasawa, and yeah, my absolute favorite anime though has to be Utena. I love
Utena is so good.
Utena. And I'm so excited because someone actually translated this, say like the Sega Saturn game, which is like a dating sim. And I'm really excited to play it once I find the time.
That is awesome.
No. And you can date all the most terrible characters who are my favorites.
Those are the best though.
Yeah, the awful people. I love awful people when I watch an anime. Okay, next question. Anybody? Hat.
How long have you been doing your voice acting, Caitlynn? And also, what was the longest you've trained for like a certain role?
So I have been in the voice acting industry for about 4 years now. I got my start with the Book of Bantora. Kimono was my very first role. When you find out you're in a show, normally you get called about 2 weeks before, and honestly, you don't know what voice you're going to be doing for them until you get in the booth. But what I do is my process is I find the show on Crunchyroll or whatever free streaming service, and I power through it, and then I go through it again and just watch scenes with my characters. I wiki them, I look at their designs, and try and figure out. My first instinct is to figure out where I want them, and then you go into the booth and then you find out what the director wants. And sometimes it's not the same. Like Austin from Sunday Without God, she's a 12-year-old. And the Japanese voice is very high. Japanese likes to make they moe 12-year-olds sound like 5-year-olds. That's just, if you ever read the internet, I get told I'm too old all the time playing 11-year-olds. And I'm like, there are 11-year-olds with deeper voices than me, people.
Yeah, I definitely had a deeper voice when I was 11.
Right? It's just this weird ageism thing with Japan, but
no, I mean I think it's sort of a socialization of women thing.
Yeah.
They're supposed to sound younger, and so they pitch their voices higher. And some women do that still in America. They'll pitch their voices higher, and it's really weird how there was like anyway, no one cares, but there was I read a study that they did where like there were dudes would pitch their voices lower in certain situations, and women would pitch their voices higher in certain situations when they wanted to emphasize their femininity or masculinity.
Yeah, well, with I was very prepared to put it kind of in a very higher, less comfortable range for me, and the director said, no, you're playing a 12-year-old. There are some situations where I want you to sound like an actual 12-year-old, so this isn't creepy and awkward, and that's a director's choice, and that's a lot of Sentai, you'll see that with, especially Shiro in No Game No Life, because she gets in a bunch of really weird, uncomfortable positions where we decided not to go super high-pitched, even though she's monotone and airy, because the fact is, first off, it's almost impossible to understand when people are speaking that high in English because our language is lazy. We have a bunch of lazy sounds. We don't enunciate or pronounce everything, so your voice ends up cracking and doing weird stuff and sounds are missed. So it's better to go lower, but also because you don't want to imagine someone who is speaking like a 5-year-old in a lot of those situations. It's not okay, Japan. Not okay sometimes. I'm in Fate Collide. I'm allowed to say this. If you haven't seen that show, good for you.
Good time.
I see you. Bye.
Yeah, the angle on this is such that if they want to see who's in the panel room, you have to see them and then you see them just disappear
Well,
slowly.
I love it. It's when they do like the side peeking, so I can just mimic and just be like, all right.
Yeah, which is, okay, back there with the goggles.
This is kind of like a harder one. I don't know if this is exactly you guys in particular, but have you seen like anyone be shot down in the voice acting area whatsoever because of a speech impediment or like a verbal disorder that they may have?
Honestly, I've never.
Sorry, and if you have, what were those things that were shot down?
Honestly, I've never seen any. I'm not in auditions, so I don't see when people are told yes and no, and I don't think they're ever really outright told no in the industry. It's more, if we don't contact you, assume you didn't get in. But I personally do have a speech impediment, not a stutter or anything, but there is an odd sound at the end of my voice that is a vocal tick. It doesn't come off as much as when I'm in character. Hi, Deadpool. It doesn't come off as much as when I'm in character, but at the end of my voice, sometimes you'll hear a sound. I can't hear it. And in theater class, my teachers taught people to snap at me and do little sounds to try and make me aware of it, which was not a good idea. Don't ever do that to someone. It's incredibly
super
cruel.
Anxious.
It's incredibly cruel, and when you can't hear it or notice it, it also causes psychological damage. I ended up in therapy thanks to that. But I've never seen it happen. And I think if people have those sort of impediments, just focusing and working on them, especially going into an audition situation, you have time to prepare. I've never honestly seen them shot down. I know several actresses who have a slight lisp. Cynthia Martinez has a slight one. Carly Mosier has a slight one. Everybody's voice has their own unique quality to it, whether it's a lisp, it's an impediment that makes their voice unique and right for something, I think. So I've never seen anybody shot down, so.
From my outside perspective, I like to read articles about people overcoming things. So I've read a lot of articles about people who have like a stutter or a lisp or some sort of other sort of speech impediment who work on it and who have like vocal coaches and so on and so forth. And a lot of people find that the sort of focused expression memorization stuff that comes with acting actually helps them overcome things. Like the guy who played, what's the guy's name in Buffy? Xander. The guy who played Xander in Buffy, before,
Brendan something. Brendan Smalls? No,
no,
Brendan Smalls is,
that's the guy from Home Movies.
Yeah, and Metalocalypse.
Oh yeah, Metalocalypse.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's,
Brendan something.
Nicholas Brendan, yeah.
Yes.
He has a stutter, and it doesn't come out when he acts because of the way that you have to sort of put yourself in a different mode and how you focus on that. And there are a lot of people who stutter. Scatman John stutters, but he doesn't stutter when he sings by the song. So there's a lot of people will have issues like that. I personally have a lisp, and that's why I was like, maybe I'll voice act, but also I'm not very good at acting, so maybe I won't. But if you have a difficulty, you can be sure that someone has overcome it and that you can do it too. So I wouldn't put yourself down if you have issues with the way that you speak or whatnot in someday becoming an actor and a voice actor, or just a voice actor or whatever.
Definitely. Also, we live in an age where our greatest enemy and our greatest ally is the internet. You can find some really horrible things on the internet, but you can also find some really awesome, again, like those stories, videos even. If you need something to help you move forward, those are really awesome. We're finding someone to connect with on it as well.
And there's also videos that will help you with like exercises to overcome that kind of thing. And also, and this is just like general advice, I know a lot of people who work freelance, and I know a lot of freelance animators, and they're always talking about how it's hard to find someone who has like a sort of professional work ethic to do voice acting for their cartoons. And sometimes they pay and sometimes they don't, which is, you know, obviously it's a sort of a barrier and to entry and stuff, is that it takes a lot of time, and if you're not getting paid, you know, the experience is not always worth it. But, you know, just keep an eye out, even if it's just someone doing, you know, little, like Mew Tokyo, Miracle, whatever, or like those animations that are always on YouTube with like the dogs that have like green streaks in their hair or whatever. Just getting experience is good, you know?
Voice Acting Alliance is really good for that also. At times it can be a little cliquish, but I know a lot of people who do Steam Greenlight projects post things on there all the time.
Yeah.
And I know people, professional people, I myself go and browse there because I'm like, I'm interested, but I'm still really, I work in anime industry, but I'm really nervous about doing online stuff because low self-esteem sometimes. I don't know why, but there's a nervous barrier to come across, so I still haven't done a lot of auditioning. But it is there. There is resources out there to sink your teeth in.
Have you ever thought about doing like video game work too?
I want to do video games really bad.
To be honest, so do I. But as a translator, it's just really hard to break into it if you're doing one thing and then you're like, now I would like to do this other thing. You have to prove yourself in a whole different medium.
Well, even finding like the ins and who to talk to, which is a big part of both of our business, is finding an in and finding someone who is open to that and like, hey, you know what? You should come try this, or you could come audition. You gotta find them, and that's kind of the hard part.
You have to sort of have friends, for instance, you can put your hand down, I'll call on you next. The reason I got the chance to audition or do the test, because a lot of times when you're doing translation work, they will send you a test to make sure that you're actually good at what you do. And this test will be like a comic that's never been translated anywhere, and the one that I got was like full of a lot of obscure Japanese history they only read about on Japanese Wikipedia, and they're just like, yeah, like it was a riot at Tokyo University that happened over like 1963 and 1964, and it was about like medical internships or something, and I was just sitting there like, I have no idea what the heck this is. I guess I have to read this Japanese Wikipedia article for like an hour. Anyway, but to get to the point where you can take that test and to get to the point where that door is open for you, a lot of times you have to go in a really roundabout sort of way. I'm friends with a chick who works at Dark Horse, and so, yeah, she does a lot of typesetting and a lot of like, you know, editorial work. And she was the one who got me this opportunity, but she didn't get it for me through Dark Horse or her connections to Dark Horse. She got it for me through the fact that her mom is a fantasy and sci-fi writer who knows this guy named Ken Liu, who this year won the Hugo Award for sci-fi and fantasy with this Chinese author, because he translated this guy's book into English, and it's called The Three-Body Problem, and it was apparently really good, and it won the Hugo Award this year. And then so she knows him through her mom, and then she DM'd him on Twitter asking him if he could help me out, and then he gave her the address for someone biz to give to me. And I was like, Ken Liu referred me, and they were like, all right, and I'm like, oh. You're like, you're sitting there like, it's so easy, but it's really not easy.
It's not. It's super roundabout. Sometimes lightning has to strike you a few times. You get electrocuted a lot in the process.
Right. I actually got my job because I was trawling Craigslist and just searching the word Japanese every day or so, and I happened to get there while like this company that's based in California had made a listing on Minnesota Craigslist, and I emailed them, and then nothing for 4 months, and then they emailed back like, do you want to take a test? And I'm like, Sure, and I've worked for them for like 3 years. Okay. So, goggles.
I was in a musical a while back when I was in high school. I had an instructor, a music instructor. She said that I had to go basically on a vegan diet before going on stage and singing and stuff like that because of the sugar that you get from the protein and stuff like that. Is that true at all? I've asked a couple other voice actors and said that was completely cool. Is it true or is it not?
I have an utter love-hate relationship with theater professors because they really like to stick their ideologies on their students, and it can be very cruel. That is absolutely not true. That's them enforcing their diet and their beliefs upon you. And it's her being very insensitive about body image. There's a reason I'm a voice actor and I haven't done stage for a long time. I had professors in college. I see cameras, so I'm gonna be a little careful about how I word that. But for the most part, it's good to have a healthy diet when you're performing on stage. But as long as you're working out, eat what you freaking want.
And
you're in high school and
right.
college, and if they're telling you you should be eating a certain way, they clearly forgot what college is like because all I remember having time for is microwave bacon and maybe bread and butter before I go back on stage and work for the next 6 hours.
Yeah.
Doing maybe 2 hours or maybe 1 hour of standing on stage while the stars rehearse. While they're like, oh hey, those next 4 hours, yeah, we need to build set. I know you got homework, but you need to prove you're really dedicated.
Oh, God.
Yeah, everybody knows what I'm talking about right now. So yeah, no, that's just someone putting their belief. It is absolutely not true. Good diets are important, especially if you're a dancer or any sort of athlete, but your diet does not keep you off the stage. That is garbage.
And there are
You are awesome, sir. Do not let that theater teacher tell you otherwise.
Yeah.
I have been someone destroyed. Well, I have been someone who was utterly destroyed by words that their professor has told them, based on your size, based on how I was, based on how my voice was, which they can pretty much, because guess what I do now?
Yeah.
But honestly, sometimes there's really good directors, sometimes there's really bad ones, and I'm really sad nowadays that education seems to be dominated with a lot of people who are really bitter. And you shouldn't let that hold you back.
For my part, as someone who doesn't do this kind of thing, there are things that you can put in your body that are better for your voice than others. Like, don't eat Doritos that you haven't chewed at all, because it'll start sucking. I know this. Never, ever eat Captain Crunch, okay? But, hot tea with lemon and honey and stuff like that.
Like to clear your voice.
Yeah, there's plenty of things that you can do with your diet that are helpful to your voice, and there are a lot of really people who are opera singers and who are big time, always using their voice, people that they might have to do because if they don't, their voice might get messed up or polyps or whatever. But if you're in a musical, if you're in high school, if you're just just starting out and just learning, I don't think that you really have to be that strict with yourself.
No. If someone's sitting there telling you should be eating an all vegan, sugarless diet, someone's on the latest trend train right now and needs to calm their ass down.
Like when I was in college, they'd be like, "Why aren't you on Atkins?" And I was on Atkins.
Tell them. Oh, I can stop because I'm very passionate about this.
Yeah, no, I get it. Actually, I was on Atkins when I was in high school, and it was the worst experience of my life because there was nothing was moving inside me, and I would just throw up every day because there was no other way for my food to get out of me. Okay, guy with glasses. Now that you've listened to that.
What's the most challenging voice role you've taken?
The most challenging voice role I've done, so many of my girls are low and or kind of soft, monotone. They really don't go anywhere, so I think the challenge of that itself is putting energy into it. But the most vocally straining one was probably Kureha Sakamachi from Mayochiki, because she's screaming and really, really eccentric the entire time. Like, in the middle of the show, if anybody's seen it, she's a pro wrestling fan. I was cast in the role because I am a mega pro wrestling fan, as I am wearing my AJ Lee shirt and my Seth Rollins hair.
Wait, what?
My AJ Lee hoodie.
Oh.
I love me some AJ Lee.
I'm not a wrestling fan, but I'm a tokusatsu fan. There's a lot of crossover, so I know a lot of things about wrestling for no good reason.
Yeah, but she was pretty spastic. She got to scream that she was putting her big brother, like the first episode, her moment is yelling, "Big brother!" then running down and screaming and putting him in various moves, screaming sharpshooter, Texas cloverleaf, as I bend him into all these different positions and break his body. So that was probably the hardest part because first off, I was really bitter about Brock Lesnar winning over The Undertaker. And
Oh my god, screw Brock Lesnar. I actually am an MMA fan, and for that reason I hate Brock Lesnar.
I hate Brock Lesnar too. He ended The Undertaker's streak.
Oh.
And I was recording right after WrestleMania 30, and I was really butthurt about it. I'm a big fan of Dean Ambrose, by the way, in the field.
So you just channeled that rage into the character?
It was a role I'd never done. I'd had Jessica Cabello over the night before because I kind of wanted to listen to someone who talked really fast, kind of like I'm doing now, since I'm kind of channeling Kureha. And then the next day, I just chugged down soda. I just chugged soda. And then I went to the booth, and the first thing Ricardo, the sound guy, asked, he goes, "Hey, Caitlyn, how do you feel that Undertaker lost?" And I went, it was just me screaming at him and vile, terrible things. And then Chris was like, "Okay, time to go." So then it was me talking like 100 miles a minute going because Kureha talks like that and screaming, and then every break just screaming at Ricardo because that's all he would mention of, "Oh, Caitlyn, how do you feel? Undertaker streak's over." I'm like, "Screw you, Ricardo!"
That's really funny. Actually, I did a test for that anime when Crunchyroll.
Did you?
Yeah, because they'll give you stuff that hasn't been subtitled yet or whatever, and they gave me like a bunch. They gave me one of her next episode previews.
Oh god.
And I actually failed out on that one because she was doing this thing where she took a saying in Japanese and replaced it with different words, and I tried to mimic the saying in English, which was like, I can't remember what it was now, but it was like, she did one where she talked about her big brother, and when you said that, I was like, wait a second. Then I remembered. That's really funny.
Well, That's the Show is actually another really good example of a joke that's very hard to translate because the brother's name is Kenjiro Sakamachi, and when you say his name Sakamachi Kenjiro, it's supposed to sound like chicken. So his entire name is Joe.
Sakamachi yeah.
Yeah, Sakamachi, because the middle part of it is like chicken, and it doesn't really make sense, so you have to they had to write it in a way that made the point of his name in Japanese when you sound it the right way. Sounds like you're calling him a chicken.
Yeah, this is impossible. So that's the part of that. I mean, one of the things that I'm very glad about is I've never had to actually write dialogue for dubs because it seems like it would be so hard.
Well, and it's really cool because you have the translator who does the first draft,
Yeah,
and then you have the
someone
ADR writer
yeah.
in between, which is really nice.
Yeah, so I wouldn't have to do it. Oh, it's so nice.
Oh, we've had shows where we've had just translation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
It's
was really rough.
because especially since if you need to change something around, you might not know if it's actually accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, wait, is this actually in the context of it? But you don't have the translator there to ask them.
Yeah,
And then if you email them, it might take them an hour because translators have ridiculous hours and sleep all day. Hi, guy.
Keep asking questions, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Go through a day of you being sick and you have to call into work. Like you wake up and then you find out you're sick, you have to call in.
Oh yeah. When I'm sick, I don't call into work. I just do my work in bed. So this is just
My first year of voice acting, I moved down to Texas and I had sinus infections for like a year. I did not ever call in.
That sucks.
I do not call in. That is just not something I do.
Well, I mean,
Well, if my voice is gone, yeah. I normally have to travel from Austin to Houston, so if I know I'm getting sick, I just go, which I have to run to the bathroom really quick. I'll be right back.
You do? Okay. Alright, cool.
But yeah, I don't really call in much, just because I find it odd.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people are like that. Like, I don't usually miss work for, basically when you're working freelance, if you don't do the work, then you don't get the money, and then
They'll
you
find
don't.
somebody else.
Well, they sometimes will find somebody else, depending on how good you are. I mean, if I was just constantly turning down jobs, they would definitely find someone else. But if I was constantly turning down jobs, it would be because I had found other work. So, you know, that's where you sort of have to. It is a job. It's work. It's 100% work. So, like, you can't just be like, you know what, I don't feel like it today. But, I mean, you can, but once you get close to deadline, you're like, I wish I had felt like it yesterday, the day before, and the day before, because now I have like 60 pages to do in a day, and I don't want to. Right, I've been sick before deadlines before, and it's been pretty bad. But, you know, I've done a whole 120-page book in a day, I think. Yeah, and I was moving that day, too. That was such a bad day. Yes, you.
So how much like freedom do you actually have with the translation or like the difficult meetings?
Yeah, well,
you get like the author's permission to
right. Usually I don't have contact with the authors. With the manga box app that I was working on, some of the authors were just starting out, and this was their first thing. And, you know, so that when they got the books, they were always really excited. And so sometimes I could actually get in touch with them on Twitter. And for the Destroyed Century Jockster comic, I actually did that. I'm actually kind of still friendly with it was a team of people who I think share the same Twitter, so I don't actually know who I was talking to. And they go by like a team name, so I'm just like, all right. Probably. I don't know your name, but that's okay. Like, it's a little easier to get on in that way. With someone in Japanese, you can know their name or you can't, and it's not a huge deal usually. So you can figure out some way to refer to them. Yes, so, and I would ask them for help. Like, that's when one of the characters whose name I had messed up a bunch of chapters because I was like, I don't know what this means, and I don't know, because it was a shortened version of a name, and they only revealed the long version later. And then when I read it, I was like, Louvet, what the hell? And then they were like, oh, it's supposed to be the German word for lion. And I was like, oh, okay. And it's spelled Loewe. And I was like, all right. So I changed it, and it all worked out very well, and I liked those people a lot, and they sent me the tankobon version of their comic with drawings inside, and they're really good drawings. I was just like, I'm so happy. But yeah, generally how much liberty and leeway you get really depends on the editors that you have, and sometimes just the people at the top. So there will be people who have like certain editorial guidelines that they want specifically done. And a lot of times it'll be something like a style guide, like Harlequin has a style guide that I really hate because it doesn't let me use the Oxford comma, and then like, also it's like sort of, it changes, so like sometimes they want me to use with 2 M's, and sometimes they want me to use 1 M, and I'm like, oh my god, make up your mind, because it's different with each different editor, and I'm just like, I don't care, I just want to get paid. Like I'm not gonna live or die on this letter M, so I'm just going to change it however you say and hope I get my money. But like when it comes to leeway with jokes and stuff, as long as it's not something that's like 100 million eyes on it, you know, like, or there's already something that they have as precedent for this character or for this story, usually I get to be free, especially when it's jokes. They're really like, most of the companies I work with are actually primarily Japanese speaking, so they'll be like, I mean, if that's a funny joke in English, all right. I'm like, okay. I mean, that's what I think. So I hope it is. And actually, I do have a friend who does comics journalism and who's a cool guy. And without me, like, I mentioned that I was on this app and that I was doing these comics, but without me actually like being like, read this comic. It's great. He read the comic, the Grandpa's Stories comic, and he really liked it and thought it was super funny. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad you like it, because I really hated it. There's a lot of panty shot jokes in there that I didn't like, and a lot of just really crass stuff that was kind of misogynist, and I was just sitting here like, I guess I have to do my job. But yeah, so, it sounds like a cop-out answer, but it really depends on the editorial staff. Like, sometimes when I read a comic, and there are decisions that I disagree with in there, like, I was reading Sailor Moon, and when they introduced the outer senshi, they romanize their names with the O with the circumflex on top to indicate the long O, and I hate that. I'm like, just use letters we have in English, please. This is an English book. You don't have to use really old romanization techniques anymore. Just put a U in there. I don't care. But from what I can tell, the way the book reads and the way the way that the lettering and phrasing is used in those particular characters' names, like Mayo, Mayo, Tenno, all that. I'm pretty sure that it came from the top. Like, it was a Kodansha editorial decision that they wanted this to be romanized in this specific way. And so I can't be mad at William Flanagan about that. But, oh, I forgot there's video. I don't know William Flanagan, so, but, yeah, so I can't actually be mad at him at all. So, but yeah. Oh good, you're back. No, it's
that
okay.
big soda kicked me in the gut midway through, and I was like, oh hey.
It's okay. It's okay. You're free to do whatever you want because we're con and we're not at a seminar. Yeah.
That is true.
Beck.
This is kind of out of the voice acting question. It's more like a personal question. What was your fear of coming here? If you fear like some random fanboy, fangirl coming here, what was your biggest fear of coming out here, if you had any?
Flying here?
Oh!
I'm terrified of planes. So normally I have to have a book, and I'm a really fast reader, so I kind of spited myself because I finished my latest White Trash Zombie book.
Oh no.
On the way here.
It's the worst if you're I'm gonna read comics, and they're just oh no, they're done, it's gone. I'm so
Yeah,
sad.
I read a comic on the way from Houston to here, from Austin to Houston, and then I read White Trash Zombie on the way to here, and it worked, especially with the high winds, and I was, oh gosh. But yeah, now I'm I can go find another book, because I gotta find something to occupy 3 hours.
Jeez.
But yeah, my biggest fear honestly is flying here. Being here for me isn't all that nerve-wracking. The one thing that gets really rough is just downtime. I'm kind of staying busy at these things because when I'm sitting and doing something, I could be doing this at home. So I want to be doing something I can't be doing at home, which is interacting with people outside Final Fantasy 14.
But there was an event this weekend, wasn't there?
Possibly.
I kept seeing my friends being I'm playing FF14 right now because of this, and I have a lot of friends who play the game, but I don't. Sorry.
Oh no, I'm thinking, I know they have new content, 3.1 patches coming out.
Yeah, someone was patching last night too, so there was a quick patch.
There's a quick patch.
Well, it was quick. They were I'm gonna stay up until this patch is done, and they're oh, it's done already. But yeah, I know that question wasn't entirely directed towards me, but I was a little afraid no one would come to any of my panels. I was a little afraid that when I say, because I have very strong opinions about my job, at my translation panel, I was I was sitting there just fuck you if you use San and Chan and you're damn translations. You're going to hell. No. I actually have to use them because sometimes the editorial like will come down from the top and be like, you have to use the honorifics, and I'm like, okay. And I still avoid them whenever I can. I'm still like, if it's a professor or a teacher, I'm still like Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, Professor So-and-so. So I'm just like,
It's so rough, especially with translations then ADR writing.
oh yeah.
Especially when you're in the booth and you're saying them and you're like, I shouldn't be saying this, but this is what they read.
Yeah, it's so hard.
It is, especially when it's like you have comics. It's hard because you're having to find a replacement term for it.
Yes.
While in English, they're saying their name with some additional things, so it's like one extra flap that you have to find a noise to make, and it's like.
Yeah, that's rough. I can imagine that would be pretty tough. Like, that's why a lot of early dubs would be like, well, excuse me, my friend. You know?
They just need a sound. So
It's just like
make a noise. Their mouth is open.
Right, also I'm really loud online about, like, when I think a translation is bad. And generally speaking, I'm not super loud about when I think pro translators are bad, because 99% of them have been working in this industry for way longer than I have, and they probably know what they're doing, even if I might not like it. But, you know, I am perennially worried that there'll be like a giant mob of fans of tokusatsu who remember the blog that I did a couple of years back where I just posted this one really prolific fan subber's awful mistakes and explained why they were awful and he sucked. And he actually got so mad he called us the Westboro Baptist Church of Tokusatsu. the Juggalos of fan subbing. Someone called us that too. I was like,
oh, I'm so sorry. We get that from people who do fan dubs who will, where I'm just like, you do know that borderline's illegal, right?
Yeah,
sorry. Oh, they're like, well, why did they cast this person who did the fan dub for it? I'm like, well, first off, they don't live anywhere near the studio, so that's a lot of money to fly someone out.
And that's just, I mean, you know, and who knows if that person has the ability to perform when there's an editor in front of them in their booth and stuff. Yes.
Horror stories in the studio? Do you have any of those? I'm guessing that's a no then.
I mean, it's nothing really horrifying. I mean, it's you and two other people. It's a really impersonal process. Well, I mean, you're in the booth, and then you have your director, and then you have the sound guy. Recording Girls in Panzer was kind of a process, because I love Janice, but she's very quiet when I was working with her, and I get really, really nervous working with a new director, so I'm very quiet, I'm not being so me, and I'm just on my game. And so I'm doing that. She's not really talking, and Chris and Kyle are people who give feedback and joke, and then both sound engineers that work with them are super, super cool. The sound engineer that day was also very quiet, so it was really awkward. And I had one of those sinus infections and my medicine wore off midway through. So my back started hurting and I'm like, this is probably the most awkward thing I've ever done. Because you're just sitting there making sounds. I had no idea. Girls in Panzer is one of the few shows I didn't know who I was going and playing. So that was really rough for me because I'm someone who really likes knowing and being prepared. So I always felt really bad about Hana, but everybody says they like her who talked to me, so that's really cool. But I felt really bad for a while about it. I'm like, I could have done so much better. But normally with me in the booth, it's something will happen and I'll just start laughing, and then they have to find a way to stop me from laughing. Because once that happens, like the Nair Lepetep moment in Maria Holic, I walked in hearing that. And I could not stop. And there's a moment in Little Busters where Meg McDonald sits there and goes super sexy, and I don't know what I was on or what was going on in my head, but the moment I heard it, I just died and just couldn't stop laughing. And it took like 5 minutes for me to calm down. And I think there's just a point in the time in the booth where you're just like, woo, done, emotions are sapped. So I don't have a lot of horror stories.
Do you have anything like, I've seen Crispin Freeman talk a lot, and he was talking about how when they were working on Utena, there was a part in the episode, Jury Unfulfilled, which is the episode where they reveal the jury has a crush on her, like,
Yes.
her like same class girl who is a girl, and the writers are like, we just don't know what's up with Jury in this episode, and he's like, she's gay and in love with a woman, and they're like, oh, anything like that, where like the character was misinterpreted, and you were sitting there like, wait a second, I watched this, and
Actually, no. With my Ochiki, though, we did have to correct a lot of things because my husband and I are both really big wrestling fans.
oh,
So some of the moves were wrong.
yeah, because I've actually had to translate wrestling stuff before, and the moves have specific names in Japanese that correspond to specific names in English. But if you translate the name into English from the Japanese, it won't sound right, and it will be you'll be trying to say they'll be trying to say suplex, but really you're saying just like overhead flip or some shit.
Yeah, well, and then you're also trying to find a name for it that correlates with something. Like when you say a sharpshooter, you know Bret Hart and the Hart family. You know who that's coordinated with. So you're trying to find essentially the right moves that correlates to someone who's relevant in wrestling, because that's the whole point of that. Japan loves their wrestling.
Right, and they have their own wrestlers that have their own specific moves, that have their own specific plot lines, and their heel turns and all that biz. And then you have to go like, okay, so who's similar enough to this wrestler that we can use their special move? Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, so Justin and I, in the middle of that, Justin's like, that's not what that is. He was my husband was with me in the studio that day, so it was really fun.
That doesn't like a good time. I was like, and then, this deep characters thing happened, so I think we're having like, wrestling though. Wrestling. That's so cute though. It's so nice because when you get to work in a situation where there's something that you actually really care about being talked about, that's, cause I've had experiences like that too, where as a translator they'll assign you, work that will have a tangent that goes off on something you're really interested in. There's a lot of references to tokusatsu and stuff in there, and I'm just like, I know exactly what I'm doing here.
Yes, I was really lucky that Chris was like, I figured this character would be wasted if I cast anybody but you in the role, which was so awesome that he's like, I know you're a pro wrestling fan, so take it. And I was like, yes.
It must feel really gratifying too.
It was really gratifying. And it's also a character that's so unlike every other character I play. It's something I can give and be like, hey, you should listen to me as this because it's not what you're expecting at all.
Yeah, and then you can sort of diversify a little bit with your, okay.
Abby, you say you did some work with Viz. Which manga did you do with Viz?
I've worked, so Viz, generally speaking, has one translator who works on the whole comic, or who works on most of the comic. If it's a big, super long-running comic like Naruto, probably a lot of translators have worked on that, but in sort of like, longer chapter bursts. So what happened with Viz is they came to my contracting company because we're sort of, I don't know if famous, but the company will do the whole thing. Like you hire them and they don't just give you the translation, they give you the finished file and then you can just edit it and put it up. So they were like, we need someone to do these one-shots for Shonen Jump. And my boss was like, I thought of you. And I'm like, okay. So what I did, this was like 3 years ago, but 2 years ago? I don't remember. 2013, so yeah, 2 years ago. And I did the one-shot that Masashi Kishimoto did, the artist who does Naruto. He did one shot called Mario, which was about a guy who was the son of an Italian mafioso and a Japanese Yakuza leader. So, and then it was like this, it was a short story about like, but most of the time when an artist who's on a long series does a short story, it leaves the end open for like, in case it hits it off with an audience and it gets really big. So it was a story where this guy there was some assassin lady and he sort of had this experience with her and then she's like assassinated another mafia person and I don't remember. It was a bunch of years ago, but yeah, I did that one. And then they had another one, which was one shot by the guy who did Siren, which at the time had just finished, I think. And I can't remember his name, but it was called Sakudan. The title had the word kari in it, which means like tentative or temporary title or whatever. And I don't know if that was a part of the title or just that the title was tentative, but it was a story about a kid who's like this normal school kid who has a visit every year on the same day from like this weird alien who asks him questions and talks to him and does stuff. And then at the end of the chapter, I guess spoilers if you're going to buy Shonen Jump from 2 years ago, it turns out that the alien was actually his childhood friend, a sexy girl, and that she had been an alien and she didn't move away when he was a kid. She had to go home, and now she's back and she wants to go to high school with him. So I don't think it went past that first chapter, but hey, I did it, and I remember reading that one and being like, hey, because there's a part where she talks to him about English, and they briefly exchange like a couple of words in English, and I changed it to Spanish, and they changed it to something else, and the like editors changed it to something else at the end, which I wasn't privy to because I work through a third party who does all the communication with the editors, so they didn't come back and say, this is what we're going to do, so you can sign off on it, because I was, essentially a nobody, and I basically essentially still am, but anyway, when I got in touch with Viz, I said I had done that, even though I was a little worried because when I applied to Crunchyroll, I had actually worked for them through my boss, my like company before, and I did the whole test, and then they were like, it was pretty good, but it wasn't perfect, and you've split the team, and we need you to do another thing, and I did another thing, and then the guy got back to me and was like, okay, we'll get back to you later, and then the next email he sent me was, wait, did you do this comic on our site? And I'm like, yes, I hope that's not a big deal. This was like my first comic, and what happened was I worked on this comic called A Town Where You Live on their site, and because I had other work and because I had only just started translating, I was doing it as it came in week by week, and they wanted me to do all the back issues too, but I did not have enough time to finish a book every 3 weeks or a book every 2 weeks while working on all my other stuff. So I did a ton. I was doing like a third of the comics on Manga Box at that time, and this was back when there were just a lot of comics on that app. And so they hired somebody else to do it, and I was really annoyed because I was like, but I had this, because the main character has an accent, and I wrote his accent in a certain way, and they just like the new translator just stripped it out, and the way that the font that they gave me for lettering, the line leading was really weird on it, so I'd always like make it a little bit smaller so that the paragraphs would fit in the bubbles better, and the other person didn't do this, so the line leading was all off, and I was just really annoyed. Anyway, so the guy emails me like, did you do this comic? And I'm like, yes, I hope that isn't a problem, and then never again replied to me. So I was a little worried about telling Viz that I had worked for them in the past, but apparently they were like, oh, that's fine, that's okay. By the way, I didn't lie to Crunchyroll and tell them I hadn't worked for them. I put the fact that I had worked for them in my cover letter, and clearly the guy didn't read it. So, stuff like that happens, and it doesn't, like, I'm not sitting here like, yeah, Crunchyroll is the worst or whatever, because in any business, someone's going to fall through the cracks sometimes, and that just happens. And I have applied to Crunchyroll again, and I'll probably apply again because, it's not a
Work is work.
Yes, work is work, and it's not about like whether they have been a jerk to you or something, because companies are made up of a lot of people, and one of those people might have been having a bad day, or they just might have forgotten about me, and then, the next time I email might be a different person, or might be the same person on a better day, or someone who's like, oh wait, I remember you. Didn't you pass our test? Whoops, you fell through the cracks, or whatever. So yeah, it depends on the company, but a lot of them are like that, and then, they might not be like 100% in communication with each other all the time, which is not, a failing. It's just a fact of life in any business, in any industry. Well, what even question was I answering? Oh, Viz, it was what I did with Viz, yes. Yeah, that's what I did with Viz. So if you were reading Shonen Jump online at the time, You read that probably. Okay, any other questions? Anybody? Come on.
We are at wrap up time, right?
Oh, it's done! I thought we still had time. We've actually gone over, I think.
We have a little bit.
Whoops, I'm sorry guys, but thanks for coming and it was really
Thank
great.
you.
I'm glad you had questions for me as well. I'm so glad. I hope you had a good time.